became devotees young, but we didn't exactly have so much to offer like Brahmananda did. He gave everything of himself, all his leadership abilities, to Srila Prabhupada, and he's glorious because of that. I knew Brahmananda for many years here, but I always remember him most from when he was young. And even then I didn't know in the very early days. But when he was a young sannyasi, I remember it was in New York in I guess 1972 probably. And he would come through. Brahmananda was an amazing presence. Brahmananda was effulgent. He was like a natural leader. He was so subtle, so intelligent, and so forceful. He would come and he would speak at the New York Temple from time to time, and it was always he was like our natural big brother, as one of the devotees was saying. He was just like a big brother to us, and when he spoke, just Bhagavad Gita class, it was so attractive. He presented the philosophy in such a natural, logical way. He was highly intelligent, and that it was only natural. People became devotees. I remember just hearing him speak. And then later, the other thing was, these are just like snippets of memories. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared at all. But the other thing that strikes me is the affection that Srila Prabhupada had for Brahmananda Prabhu. Now, I remember it was in 1974 at the Mayapur, that was the first Mayapur Vrindavan festival. I don't know where Brahmananda was coming from. Maybe it was Africa. I don't know where, but Brahmananda came late in the festival. And I remember being in the, I guess it's called the Lotus Building now, where this is in Mayapur, where Prabhupada's rooms are, that building. And we were on the veranda, and Prabhupada was also on the veranda. And Brahmananda was coming up to see Prabhupada, and he had his danda, and he was walking up, and it was late in the festival that he was coming. And Prabhupada was so happy to see him. Prabhupada was so affectionate to Brahmananda Prabhu. One devotee told me that when he came back now maybe he was getting it mixed up with Gargamuni's story, but he said that when when Brahmananda came from Pakistan, Prabhupada was so happy to see him. And he was greeting him, and he gave orders that he be fed immediately, and that it was Ekadasi. And he said no, he should be given puris and halava. And this devotee that was telling me was a sannyasi, and he said on that day all the sannyasis ate puris and halava. But they got in trouble because it was only meant for him. But Prabhupada's affection for Brahmananda, because Brahmananda gave everything to him. And then later, after Prabhupada left, as Govinda Dasi said, Brahmananda could not bear that Prabhupada's teachings were being kept from the devotees because they didn't have the money to pay for the folio and things. And Brahmananda and Gargamuni Prabhu were the first, I would say, to democratize Srila Prabhupada's teachings. and make them available to all the devotees, the tapes and the books and the folio, the videos, and we're very grateful for that. And anyway, it seems to me in the last days that Brahmananda was waiting for Srila Prabhupada to call him. We all knew that. And I think that probably on this day, it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj's appearance day. Tamal came over to Brahmananda. He said, "Hey Brahmananda, Prabhupada's calling you." Brahmananda left. So, thank you.
Shri Brahmananda Prabhu ki! So we'd like to thank Manjari Mataji for very nicely again describing how Brahmananda had that keen intelligence to be able to see who Srila Prabhupada was and be able to surrender him fully and fully. So in this particular session we have one more speaker. It's getting very late. We're starting to people are disappearing. So I'd like to ask Her Grace Mahadevi Mataji to please make her offering for Brahmananda Prabhu. And we also want to thank her for selflessly serving Brahmananda Prabhu day and night for many years now.
Namo Vishnuvidaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Shamaniti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Devi, Om Yavani Vicharine, Nirvisesha Sunyavadi, Paskachadi Shatarine, Panchakalpaturvischa Kripasindhavya Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavi, Yo Namo Namaha. Please forgive my appearance and my demeanor. I have been ill for many weeks, and being with Brahmananda Prabhu.
You have to speak clearly, we're not understanding the words.
Sorry. I was just asking for your forgiveness if the way I look and my demeanor. I've been quite ill and last few weeks, and also trying to take care of Brahmananda Prabhu, who's also had this very heavy respiratory infection for many weeks. His last day, Gargamuni called me very early, and he had become dizzy, and he fell out of bed, and therefore in the pictures you see this big bump and gash on his head. And I arrived, and there was blood and on his face and on the floor. And so first I just tried to clean up his face and called devotees at the temple, Dharmama Prabhu and Saranga Thakur Prabhu, to come, and so we could lift Brahmananda Prabhu in a more comfortable position. So it was a long day. Brahmananda Prabhu was in great breathing distress. His breathing was like, but in between, he would be going, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, just like our children in the beginning days. They couldn't say all of the syllables, Srila Prabhupada's name, and it was like that many hours. There was a few of us there, the doctor was there, and I was very much against him going to Delhi, Gargamuni and I kept looking at each other, knowing that this could possibly be Brahmananda's last day. Brahmananda, when you were with Brahmananda, you felt Srila Prabhupada's presence very, very distinctly and very much alive. Through the years that I got to have the great honor and fortune of serving Brahmananda Prabhu with his medical and legal issues, I also got to bring many guests and devotees to see Brahmananda Prabhu. And the way he would speak about Srila Prabhupada, everyone in the little small room, their eyes would be filled with tears and love for Prabhupada. They would ask so many nice questions, and this gave Brahmananda life and health. His eyes would twinkle. He would smile and laugh and tell so many stories. One particular story that he told, that, well, many, but this one, he was telling the devotees how to read Srila Prabhupada's books. In Prabhupada's purports, he gives many references to Bhagavad Gita, to TLC, to Nectar of Devotion. And so Prabhupada was saying that Brahmananda Prabhu was saying, when we're reading the purport, that if we want to get the fullness of Prabhupada's purport, then we read the reference as Prabhupada is saying in between the sentences. So he was teaching me how to do that one day. We were reading a purport actually in the prayers of Queen Kunti, and Prabhupada was, as usual, making many references to Bhagavad Gita. So we went to this reference, we read the verse, the purport, then we went back to the purport in that particular verse. And it made the whole purport become very much more full and rich. And Brahmananda was always so happy to talk about Prabhupada's books and how much he put his whole life and soul into Prabhupada's books, and his care and his love for the devotees. In reference to the prayers of Queen Kunti, when Prabhupada was ill, many times, he would ask Brahmananda Prabhu to read to him from the prayers of Queen Kunti. So it was my great fortune also to be allowed to read some of the prayers of Queen Kunti to Brahmananda Prabhu as he requested. One time, many years ago, I got the great fortune of telling some devotees to please come and hear from Brahmananda Prabhu. And they asked, well, what kind of prasadam should we bring in? So I said, well, he loves sweets. So he loves cake and he loves cookies. So there must have been about 15 devotees, and they each one brought cake and cookies, but it was way too much because Brahmananda, as well as all of his other medical issues, he also had diabetes. So when he saw all of it, he says, we have to hide all of this from Gargamuni because he won't let me have all this. Then I realized, it was a mistake to have so many sweets brought to Brahmananda, because if a diabetic takes too much sweet, they can collapse. So I told Brahmananda, just accept a few and then they can be distributed to the devotees and to the workers also in Ananda Krishnavan. So he agreed to that. But in reference to this word cake, that day, the last day when Brahmananda was breathing like this, and I had been at his feet for many hours, massaging his feet because they were very dry and crusty. And Saranga Thakur Prabhu and Dharma Prabhu, who I have so much admiration and respect for. Saranga Thakur Prabhu just did so much service. And he, as we were watching Brahmananda Prabhu struggling with his breaths and putting the oxygen mask on, we were giving him juice and pani as he kept asking for. And then he said to Brahmananda, "Would you like some cake?" And Brahmananda, for the first time in hours, his eyes just went open and he had this big smile on his face. He didn't say anything, but it was just very much childlike how he responded to that word cake. So as the hours went on that day, Brahmananda, his breathing becoming more and more distressed, as he was saying, "Prabhupada," very slightly then, very, very slightly. So we didn't want to, and we had Prabhupada bhajans playing. We didn't want to disturb his meditation. So we were all discussing the medical issue and what to do, and I kept saying, no, the ambulance came with a little stretcher that even I couldn't fit into. And the people who were driving the ambulance, they saw Brahmananda's size and were like afraid what to do. Then we brought this mattress thing, and that wasn't going to work. Then we had previously, many hours before, we had asked a few local hospitals if they could accommodate Brahmananda Prabhu, and they said that he needed to be in an ICU in a specialized hospital. So one thing after another just wasn't working. And then as we were standing there at the door, Gargamuni Prabhu, the only one sitting there, Prabhupada just decided to take him right there and took him, and then he kind of collapsed over. And as he did, apparently his foot pushed over the oxygen tank, and it made this colossal sound. You could hear it practically all the way to the temple. And workers and people came running in to Brahmananda's room to help lift him and put him on the nice, clean mattress that we had made so the devotees could come and get their last darshan of Brahmananda Prabhu. So I just wanted to thank my god sisters Manjari and Kusha, Priyasaki, and Kaishori, my dear godbrothers Dinabandhu and Gopal Krishna Maharaj. Brahmananda Prabhu always said, Gopal Krishna Maharaj is my GBC. And by the way, Brahmananda Prabhu's visa had ended 2 months ago, and we had to go through a very complicated procedure to get this medical extension. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj immediately offered his support and quite a bit of money to help Brahmananda's medical bills, and instructed his disciples, whatever Brahmananda Prabhu needs, you must be right there to help him. So somehow or another, it was required that we find some senior medical officers. So I went to Mathura and personally brought these 3 CMOs, chief medical officers, and they came into the room, and Brahmananda had to wear this pressurized air mask several times a day and all through the night, because he had this thing called apnea, where the trachea closes and you can't get air. So prior to this respiratory infection, he already had breathing problems. So when the chief medical officers saw Brahmananda's condition, they immediately they called the FRO people who were saying that Brahmananda had to travel all the way to America to get his visa renewed. And we were trying to tell him it wasn't possible. How can he even go to the bathroom or sit on the chair? And they were saying, no, no. So then they confirmed, no, this American citizen is completely unfit to travel. And so Brahmananda again said, this was Prabhupada. This was Prabhupada saving me, because so many times Brahmananda would say so many times, Prabhupada was not only my spiritual master, but he was like my father. And actually, when his own father told Gargamuni and Brahmananda that they were not allowed to come home anymore. Brahmananda and Gargamuni came from an incredibly wealthy family, 32-room mansion, limousines to take them to school. Brahmananda was a wrestling champion in school. They had a lot of prestige and money, but the father was very angry that they were turning to this Indian Swamiji and kind of ignoring their family responsibilities. So one day the father made it very clear, I'm going to write you out of the will, which meant millions of dollars, literally millions, and it's either the Swamiji or me. And they went to Prabhupada and they told the father, first of all, well, we choose Swamiji. We're very sorry, Father, but we choose the Swamiji because we know this is the right thing to do for the rest of our lives. So even at 17, Gargamuni was 17, Brahmananda was 21, they're 4 years apart. They even knew then. So then they went to Prabhupada, who was Swamiji at the time, and they said, Swamiji, our father has disowned us. He's taken us out of the will. We wanted to give you all that money, but now we literally are homeless. We have no place. And Brahmananda, when he tells the story, would have tears in his eyes, and he said he took both of them in his arms and embraced them and said, I will be your father. I will be your father. So when Brahmananda tells that story, he said, I not only lost my spiritual master when Prabhupada left this planet, but I also lost my real father, and throughout my whole life, sometimes I had to be heavy, but I felt like I was the son who had to protect his father. And it was like that when you see all the numerous pictures of Prabhupada and Brahmananda together. Brahmananda was always the Kshatriya, and yet he was so Brahminical at the same time, always protecting Prabhupada. And yes, as my dear godbrothers and sisters were saying, whenever Prabhupada had something very intense to do, he would call on Brahmananda. And Brahmananda told us that when he was in Africa, actually he just wasn't sitting there in some comfortable place. Many wealthy Gujarati people were giving him a nice place to stay and nice prasadam and Lakshmi, so many things. But Prabhupada was constantly calling him to different places. And one place in particular was Bombay, Juhu, and he said only Brahmananda could manage the situation, because it was so, as Gargamuni Prabhu was saying, rats as big as cats, and so much poverty and so many legal problems. But when Brahmananda came there, the devotees felt like the presence of Prabhupada, and we will overcome this situation. And even with his own hand, the machete cutting down the big overgrown foliage and bushes, that Prabhupada had instructed, we need to cut this down and make our presence, make clearly our presence there. So I wrote some different things, but it's all been said. And I'm going to miss Brahmananda Prabhu a lot. But also, I'm also very grateful in my heart that he's been taken out of his suffering. Because in the last few years, he has endured a lot, physically and in so many ways. And one thing just coming to mind is that Brahmananda Prabhu said that Prabhupada, who also had to endure many medical issues, also Prabhupada had diabetes, and his legs would swell up, and he would hear this gonging sound in his head. And just being an elderly man, he had to undergo, and sometimes because he had had those strokes, one side of his body would become very numb. And still we saw Prabhupada, how he traveled and preached so extensively. So Brahmananda Prabhu told me one time that when he would see Prabhupada go through these things, that he would pray very fervently to Krishna, Krishna, you please give me some of Prabhupada's suffering. Please, you. So as time went on, Brahmananda Prabhu noticed that he was getting one ailment after another. And after Prabhupada left, Brahmananda's health continued to have different challenges. But because Prabhupada never complained, Brahmananda said, Prabhupada never complained about his health, about hardly anything. He was very much convinced that Krishna would take care of everything and everyone. So Brahmananda said, I tried to adopt this mentality of not complaining about my health or different things that he had to go through with the devotees. Actually, there was a lot of heartbreaking situations with the devotees that we don't need to go into here. But he really tolerated, and he never said, when these things involved him, he would just lift his hand and say, Krishna knows, Prabhupada knows. And so he inspired in me to complain less about health or emotional situations. And I have great gratitude, immense. I can't even describe how much I love Brahmananda Prabhu, not only as trying to be a servant and as his god sister and as a friend, but because whenever he spoke, I immediately felt Prabhupada's presence, and I'll be eternally indebted to him for giving me that association. Thank you so much. And Brahmananda Prabhu, please watch over us from Goloka Vrindavan. I know you're at the lotus feet of Prabhupada right now in your new form, and you're doing something really incredibly wonderful for Prabhupada. We all love you, and we will always love you. Hare Krishna.
Shri Brahmananda Prabhu ki. So we'd like to thank from the bottom of all our hearts, Mahadevi Mataji, for taking such nice care of Brahmananda Prabhu and for describing very intimately the last moments of Brahmananda before Prabhupada took him to the spiritual world. So we'll end our morning session here. 5:30 we'll again churn the ocean nectar. I have still a lot of written offerings that came. So from 5:30 onwards, Brahmananda Prabhu